evening, and welcome to DS Radio. That's Domination and Submission Radio. My name is Mike Makai, and I am your host with the most DS, BDSM, kink, and fetish talk on Blog Talk Radio or anywhere, and I'm not wearing any pants. Actually, I'm wearing pajama bottoms. So let's dive right into our normal information at the beginning of the show, tell you how you can participate in this show. We do have a chat room, so you can chat with us via text in the chat room if you have a free Blog Talk Radio account. They're easy to get. You can also check us out online at our website, which is www.domination-submission.com. There's a contact form there, so you can send emails directly to me, or you can call in, and that is our preferred method of interacting with us on the air. The number to call in is 347-857-1862. Again, 347-857-1862. Our co-host this evening is the Amazon switchy redhead, Little Red. I thought you were going to be late tonight, Red.
Well, I'm driving, so I thought I'd give you a call while I was driving, and, I just think I'm full of surprises.
Well, I'll let you get where you're going while I introduce our topic this evening, and then maybe you can join us after our first caller this evening. And we do have a caller that we want to make sure we get on. So I'll let you pull over safely somewhere, Red. Don't get any tickets or anything, and we'll.
I never get tickets because redheads have big boobs, so cops like to stare down blouses.
Yeah, well, I get lots of tickets. I'm boobless, so all right. We'll talk to you in a minute, Red. Okay, so our topic this evening is how to spot a predator and what to do about it. Now, this is a topic that seems to get a lot of traction in the lifestyle, and I don't know personally if this is because it is widely misunderstood or because it's widely understood. I wish I could figure that out. I do believe that this is a topic that needs a lot of clarification both in and out of the lifestyle. And I think one of the things that we need to talk about first and foremost is, what do you define as a predator? And how do you differentiate between a guy or a girl who just happens to be a jerk and a real predator? Now, let me just say right up front that breaking someone's heart doesn't make you a predator, all right? This is a pet peeve of mine. I hear people being labeled as predators because they broke so-and-so's heart, and then they broke somebody else's heart, and they broke somebody else's heart, and, oh my gosh, they broke 3 women's hearts. They must be a predator. Well, not necessarily. I mean, it doesn't mean they're not a predator, but they're not a predator just because they broke somebody's heart. All right, so let's get that out of our heads right off the bat. Now, does make somebody a predator versus just being a jerk? Well, let's look them up, shall we? We'll find the definition of a jerk, and the jerk is defined in at least one dictionary as someone who is contemptibly naive, fatuous, foolish, or inconsequential. Kind of interesting. Contemptibly naive, fatuous, foolish, or inconsequential. Personally, I think we all know a jerk or two out there. They may or may not be inconsequential. Sometimes a jerk can be very consequential, can cause lots of problems in our lives and bring drama to our doorstep and that sort of thing. But I think you have to go much further than being a jerk in order to be called a predator. Now, predators are something else entirely. And again, let's go to the dictionary to talk about predation and prey. To prey upon somebody, is to seize or devour as an animal does, i.e. a fox will prey on a rabbit or rabbits. Predation or preying can mean attacking, exerting a harmful or destructive influence on someone, victimizing people. I think the common thread here is that you've actually caused some harm to somebody, and you do it on a relatively habitual basis. This is not the fact that you harmed someone once in your life, because you know what? I've harmed people in my lifetime, and I'm sure you probably have too. It doesn't necessarily make you a predator. I think that what makes you a predator is that you are habitually harmful to the people around you, that you are exploitative, that you may even go well beyond being a jerk or being creepy, but being a sociopath. And so we'll talk a little bit more about those particular characteristics of a predator. And I also wanted to bring up a point here that was mentioned to me by my good friend Cheeky Geeky, a friend of mine in the local community who posted a very interesting note on FetLife.com just the other day. And her note basically consisted of, hey everyone, don't forget that predators necessarily all males. There are female predators out there. You don't see as many of them. Maybe they're just a little bit more subtle, but there are female predators out there, and I can attest to that. I have experienced a few myself. So just remember that whatever we say this evening during this show applies equally to males and females, and not necessarily just dominants, but submissives too. There are predator submissives out there, and sooner or later you're going to run across one, and don't say I didn't warn you. So now let's just face facts though. Most of the predators that you meet in this lifestyle are going to be males, and the great majority of them are going to be dominants. And so we're probably going to spend a lot of time assuming, just for the sake of argument and for this show, that we're talking about male doms. But just remember, this applies equally to females and to submissives. Now, I did like one writer's, as I was looking for ideas about for this show, I found one writer that made a very interesting point and expounded on it quite well, talking about what she terms the creepy dom. Again, not every jerk of a dom out there is a predator. Sometimes they're just creepy. Sometimes they're just jerks. But what makes somebody what you might call a creepy dom or a jerk of a dom? And before we get too far into sociopaths and predators, we'll talk a little bit about creepy doms, because I think this is kind of important to understand the difference here. Let me just throw another fact out here before we wade too deeply into this particular swamp. Predator/prey dynamics, play, activities, scenes, whatever you want to call it. This is a very complicated thing, and not all predation necessarily has to be bad. Believe it or not, predator/prey is listed as a fetish by 17,958 people on FetLife.com. Think about that for a minute. For all of the bad publicity, all of the bad press that predators get, predators are listed as a fetish by 17,958 people on FetLife. That ought to blow your mind. That also should expand your mind just a little bit and make it fairly clear to you that this isn't all black and white. One person's predator just might be another person's wet dream. I understand that thought probably sickens many of you who are listening to me. It kind of sickens me too, because it really, I don't know. I just cannot wrap my head around somebody who thinks that a predator or being the prey of a predator would be a cool thing. But apparently 17,958 people do. Now, why do people accept this sort of thing into their lives? Why do they fantasize about it? Why do they list it as a fetish? Why do they put up with it? Why do they keep themselves in denial about how harmful this can be to them? Well, let's face it, nobody fantasizes about pre-scene negotiations and hard and soft limits. I mean, these are just not things that people fantasize about. People fantasize about being taken. People fantasize about having their limits pushed. They fantasize about the guy who pushes you up against the wall and screws you till your legs are shaking so bad you can't stand up. These are things that make the fantasies interesting, exciting. But unfortunately, these are also sort of things that can get you into a lot of trouble. Now, so anyway, I read a very interesting essay about what one writer called the creepy dom. And she listed a few very interesting clues about what makes somebody a creepy dom. And let me just throw a few of them out, and then we're going to take a call and maybe expound on some of these a little bit. The first one is he comes on too strong, too fast. Too strong, too fast. Now, I don't have to explain that to anybody listening this evening, I'm sure. Here's the other one. Another one. He wants a quick commitment. He's only known you a few hours, maybe a couple of days, and he wants to collar you. He wants you to be his property. He wants a contract signed and notarized right now. He is what we call consensually challenged. Consensually challenged. He doesn't quite grasp the concept of consent and how important it is in this lifestyle. He thinks if you like rough sex, then you must not really mean it when you say no. Here's one I find very interesting. He definitely exaggerates his connections and his experience. And this writer shared a very interesting little story. She had met a dominant at a play party or something like that, and he was talking with her, and he did some name dropping, basically trying to associate himself with some big names in the lifestyle in order to increase his credibility. And so he named Jay, what's his name? That rope expert, Jay, what's his name? And the writer said, "Oh, do you mean Jay Wiseman, the author of S&M 101?" And this dominant said, "Oh yeah, that's his name. He wrote S&M 101." Well, 15 minutes later, she heard him talking to another person at that event and saying that he was a good friend of Jay Wiseman's, the author of S&M 101, when 10 minutes ago he didn't even know that this guy had written that book. So take it for what it's worth. Sometimes these people will just mine you for information and then spit it right back out for credibility's sake, even though they know absolutely nothing about the lifestyle. And here's one other thing. They are exploitative. They take advantage of weakness, vulnerability, naivete, and sometimes they take advantage of a situation in ways that you really don't expect. For example, if you are in a scene, maybe with somebody else entirely, but you may be in a scene and you may be in subspace and not able to really recognize what's going on around you, not really able to respond adequately to people trying to talk to you or trying to interact with you. This is the type of guy who will take advantage of you while you are in subspace, or while you are intoxicated, or while you are sleeping or passed out, or whatever it is. These are these people are very exploitative, and so those are at least this writer's 5 or 6 signs of a creepy dom. Now, at what point does a creepy dom become a predator or a sociopath? And I'm going to use the word sociopath a lot this evening. But in order to help us with this is my good friend Kaylee, who's agreed to call in this evening and share a little of her experience with our audience this evening. Is this you, Kaylee?
Yes. Hi, Mike.
Hi. How you doing? So you're gonna tell us a story. Well, thank you for calling in. You're going to share something with us, and you and I have kind of talked about this before. But tell the listeners what you've gone through and how you know that somebody is a predator.
Wow. And just to start off and say, I still have a hard time using that word with him. with regard to him. Although as more and more it seems like there's a pattern of behavior, I think it's more applicable. You know? So I met someone when I re-entered the lifestyle, and really who I met first was his sub, who was sent to a party to befriend me. And then once I was her friend, he started calling me to try to help me or give me advice, and kind of pursued me, and went to a private gathering where some play was happening, and ended up scening with him and had a lot of like chemistry at the bottom, and kind of looked around me, saw all these people that trusted him or seemed to trust him, saw his sub, saw that she was safe or seemed safe, and concluded that he was a safe person to be with. Not knowing that it seems like he regularly violates people's hard limits, not just testing them, but decides that, you know, they shouldn't be limits, that he gets to decide what limits should be for everyone. So, like, listening to your list, the consensually challenged part, he would definitely fit on that. You know, I think as I went in the relationship, there were things that happened along the way that I just kind of ignored. You know, you get that gut feeling. One of the things that I let be explained away were some lies and dishonesty that were reframed as tests of my submissiveness. And ultimately, after he had violated some hard limits of mine in a scene that was just really awful for me, and after reading your book, actually, I knew that I needed to get away from him. But I was silent about it, which I'm kind of embarrassed. You know, you don't know what to do. Like, when do you speak? This person seems to have this reputation and connection in the community. I was an unknown. You know, he made sure I didn't really connect with people. You know, I was only supposed to trust him. Anytime I talked with other people, he would get really, really upset and tell me that I was not being submissive by trying to connect with community. That's another flag. Totally should have ran with that one. And then after I left, one of his other slaves has recently left because he violated her limit as well. He had access to her bank accounts and basically wiped her out financially and had her convinced that she was a bad slave because she wanted to have limits. And it's just, and actually got her to go to his place by telling her that I was there after I'd broken it off with him. So that, more than anything else, made me feel like I needed to start speaking up about this situation.
Right. Yeah, that's a big deal. You know, not just recognizing a predator, but what do you do about a predator once you recognize it? Because, I mean, that leaves you wide open for all kinds of problems also. But because he was using your name to exploit another person, you felt you needed to speak up. So what did you do?
Yes. You know, I've tried. I haven't really done much yet. I said I would. This is the first time I've really talked very openly about it. You know, I've talked with the former slave. She's not yet ready to that point of speaking openly about it. I think that both of us are still fearful that because we were relatively new in the lifestyle when we met him, that, you know, one of the things he would regularly say is he would ruin our reputations in the community. And so I think that we're both a little bit fearful of that. You know, I know that he knows information about me personally that would damage my personal life.
There's a lot of we have a lot of things we're going to talk about. A lot of the flags, yellow flags, red flags, clues, questions to ask. But that's not something that's on any of these lists. I'm looking at all these little lists I have laying around. My desk is a clutter of little 3x5 cards. But one thing that's not on any of these lists, and it's very rarely ever mentioned anywhere by anyone, is that anyone who threatens you in any way, shape, or form, that's a huge, huge red flag right there. I mean, somebody who says, I will beat you to a pulp, somebody who says, I will ruin your reputation, somebody who says, I'll go after your family, those sorts of things, that should be a huge red flag, and you need to run, not walk from that person because, this is not, at what point can you even remotely characterize that kind of a dynamic as consensual when there are threats involved? Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to make sure that got said. So go on with your story.
I agree. I agree 100% with that. And that was where I drew a line pretty early. I think I was fortunate in seeing things and having enough self-worth to say, this person is telling me, I'm not submissive if I walk away from this, and that's just not true. And so, and you get emotionally entrenched, just like any situation, and it's kind of gray. I mean, you wonder, especially when you're new, you wonder, is this really normal? Is this abuse? Is it just me not really knowing? He keeps telling me I don't know, and so, I think that predators try to plant those seeds and grow self-doubt so that, they get to try to determine what reality is for you. And I think that that's another flag that I would say, the more that happens, the more you want to pull away, run. Connection with community, I think, is something that I can't stress too much, Like trying to isolate you from other people is not necessarily, is not really a good thing, And then
there's a huge difference. There's a huge difference between screening people to make sure that you're interacting with good people versus just cutting you off from the community entirely. I screen people for some of my close friends, quite a few. In fact, I've even helped you, Kaylee. But the point is here that I'm not telling anyone don't talk to anyone. I'm just saying don't talk to the bad people.
Right.
And so I think there's a big difference there, and you just have to realize anybody who tries to cut you off from the community as a whole and tells you that you shouldn't trust anyone, and all of those guys are posers or are predators or whatever. Sorry, no, not all of them are. And usually what it boils down to is this is a matter of projecting. He's telling you all those people are bad, when in fact he's the problem sometimes. So go on.
I would say that one of the things I've also learned is that, people are very polite and respectful, especially the people who've been in the lifestyle a long time. And so just because they treat somebody with respect doesn't mean they actually like or endorse another person. And so I think, ask more questions than you think you should. Go deeper, find out definitions, find out what people really mean when they say something. If somebody says, I like to push limits, don't just let that go. Dig deeper and kind of try to uncover, what does that mean? What does that look like? What are some situations when you've done that? What's happened?
Exactly. Now, was that the dividing line for you, Kaylee, that separated him from being just a jerk and being a predator? The fact that he not just violated your hard limits, but he seemed to be habitually violating people's hard limits. That the final straw
and
for you?
Deliberately. I think it's two things. I think it was intent. He intentionally set out to do it, and he did it and he did it habitually, repeatedly.
Right.
So it was intent and repeated behavior. So I think that to me what makes him a predator. You know, and then the use of deceit to try to lure new people to him would be the third aspect.
Yeah, that's a real big one right there. Is and here's the other thing: is there's almost always a stream of new victims because he uses them up and tosses them aside. That should be something that everybody should be on the lookout for. But we'll talk more about some of these clues. But I do appreciate you calling in and telling us your story. And I think it's one that I believe you've written about this on FetLife. If anybody is interested, they can contact Katie individually and maybe add her on FetLife and read her account. It should be read by everybody. I think it should be required reading. I mean, I might just make sure that everyone I ever care about gets sent to Kaylee's FetLife to read your essay on this. So thanks very much for calling in, Kaylee. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right,
bye.
Okay, so that was my friend Kaylee, and she does have a very, very nice, very well thought out and well written essay on this particular topic, and I believe this particular incident. And to be fair now, I mean, there's really nothing wrong with exploring limits, maybe even pushing limits, but it must be consensual. And I've had this conversation with people myself, where people have listed limits, I think sometimes arbitrarily, but it's not my business. It's not my place to tell them that their limit is arbitrary. But I will tell them sometimes that I know you've listed this as a limit. I'm willing to explore that if you want to push the boundaries of your limits. If you want to try something, even though you have it listed as a limit, we can do that. But only when you tell me explicitly, verbally, to my face, that you want me to push that limit. I'm never going to push somebody's limits without their express consent on that. And that's probably the way it ought to be across the board. So we're going to take a very short musical break, and when we come back, we'll have Little Red on the line with us, and we'll continue talking about our topic this evening, which is how do you spot a predator, and what do you do about it when you do. You're listening to DS Radio. My name is Mike Makai. We're back. DS Radio, Mike Makai, and Crazy Redhead Amazon, Little Red. Are you there, Red?
Yeah, I'm here. And no, I am no longer driving. I have parked.
Very good. Very good. You know what's worse than texting and driving? Broadcasting a radio show and driving. That's what's worse. So.
I have a Bluetooth, thank you very much. I am completely safe. Both hands on the wheel and my Bluetooth in my ear. So neener.
Well, okay. All right. So, what do you think of Kaylee's story?
I think she should have fucking took a vice grip to his balls, but that's me.
But then you do that with all your friends. So.
No, I don't. I am sweet and loving and tender and compassionate until you push my buttons.
Yeah, and every. So, I'm gonna throw something out here. I want to see what you think. Statistic, Red. There's a book by a woman named Martha Stout that was published in 2005. It's called The Sociopath Next Door: The Ruthless versus the Rest of Us. Right? And
which is actually more common than people think.
Oh yeah, it is. Well, this is the point I'm going to make here. She says that sociopath predators make up 4% of the population, roughly 1 in 25 people. So chances are very good that you know a sociopath predator. What do you think of that?
Oh, I'm absolutely positive of it.
Well, what do you do? What do you do when you realize that somebody you know, somebody maybe that you interact with on a fairly regular basis, is a predator? What do you do about that? What do you do, Red?
I watch. If they go to interact with people that I truly care about, then I warn those people how I feel if they ask for my opinion. Mm-hmm. Because if they come up and say, hey, what do you think of so-and-so, and they're all giddy, and I've got that sick feeling in the bottom of my stomach, I tell them, I don't think it's okay, and this is why. Mm-hmm. And if somebody doesn't like my opinion, then by all means, please come have the balls to say something to my face, because generally they don't. Once someone says something negative about them, they generally don't try to sway that person's opinion. They will try their hardest to get you away from the people who have negative opinions of them.
Mm-hmm. Now, how
they will try to only have you around those that are positive influences in their world.
Right. How specific do you get, Red? Because I don't. I mean, when I know somebody's a predator...
Oh, I get very specific because I don't give a damn whether somebody likes me or not. If it's my opinion and there's something about it that I can back up, then I give my opinion and I give you whys. If it's just solely based on my opinion, the statement that follows is, in my opinion, this is XYZ, Y, blah, 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 and whatever, and I'll drop names. I don't care. Because if it's my opinion, I have a reason for my opinion. You don't like my reason, sucks to be you.
Now, see, I tend not to be very specific for a lot of reasons. I'm one of those people who believes there are 3 sides to every story, your side, my side, and, the real side or something. I don't know that I am qualified to be judge, jury, and executioner for somebody. Maybe I have a misunderstanding of what really happened, and unless I was there, and you and I both know of situations that have in our local community that have been or could have been.
Oh, very much so.
But we weren't there where we read, so we really don't know what really happened.
That's why whenever this kind of thing comes up and somebody goes, hey, blah, 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 what do you think about, Mike? Mm-hmm. Using you for an example. Mike's a great guy. I've known him for over a year. We do the radio show together. We've spent quite a fair amount of time together. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, he's a good guy. Well, ex-member comes up, and he's new to the program, and somebody says, well, what do you think of him? I don't know anything about him.
Right.
If there's somebody that I do know something about, and me and them are oil and water, then I will tell them. My opinion's kind of biased because I don't like them.
Mm-hmm. Now, see, I'll do very much the same, but I'm not very specific. When somebody asks me about so-and-so, what about this guy, what about that guy, or what about this girl, I'll say, I may not be qualified to judge, but I just get a real creepy feeling about that person. And, there's nobody can argue with that. They can't argue with my creepy feeling. They could say that I was wrong about something that happened or something that was reported or whatever, but there's nobody going to be able to argue with my creepy feeling. So that's basically all I do. Now, unfortunately, I've had people come back later and say, why didn't you tell me about this, that, or the other thing? Well, it's not really my place. I assume that everybody out there is an adult and is capable of making up their own minds. And if they were really concerned, not after the fact, because hindsight is always 20/20, but if they were really concerned at the time, they would have dug a little deeper. But
you and I have had that discussion before about people who truly intend you harm. Mm-hmm. We had that discussion. God, I don't know. It was probably last summer. About the rapists. Mm-hmm. Generally, if someone is a serial rapist and they're not doing it just, every day, they're going to cultivate a relationship with you, and they're going to wait approximately 1 year from the time they meet you and start cultivating the friendship with you to do anything to you, because by then the warning bells are stopping. You no longer get that sick feeling in your stomach. The hair on the back of your neck no longer stands up. Goosebumps don't come around when they come around anymore because they've brought you soup when you're sick. They've asked you, oh, how did that go for you? They care about you and your life, and they don't see you as a person anymore if they're going to target you.
Yeah. I think
see you as an object.
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure that I agree with that statistic, but you're right in the sense that most crimes, particularly crimes of passion, crimes of violence, and, believe it or not, financial crimes. So I used to be in the banking industry. Most crimes of passion, crimes of violence, and financial crimes are committed, and this is over 50%, are committed by people we know and trust, or at least we think we know and trust. So, yeah, I do understand what you're saying there. Just because you've known somebody casually for a year doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to still be careful. But
you always want, like Kaylee and you were saying, the community is your biggest advocate. There is going to be problems within every community. No one is going to get along with everybody. It's not humanly possible. Mm-hmm. But if someone is trying to actively keep you from meeting new people or going to munches or coffees or play parties and things like that and telling you how bad these people are, this mm-hmm. needs to stop right now, because somebody in that community knows about that person. Somebody in that community had a bad experience with them, and somebody else did, and somebody else saw it, and somebody knows something.
Sure. And, it doesn't hurt to have somebody looking out for your interests and acting as a protector in this community. And I do that for several people. And to be honest with you, that one of the events that happened in that in that frame of reference is kind of what made me decide to do this show tonight on this topic, because one of the girls that I am protecting asked me, would it be all right to go out for dinner and a movie with this guy? And she throws out a name. And I said, well, what do you know about him? She said, well, I know his name. That's about it. But he says he wants to take me out for dinner and a movie. I just wanted to ask you if you thought it would be all right. And I said, well, let me check him out. Well, it turns out he lives 3.5 hours away. So he's willing to drive 7 hours round trip to take her out for dinner and a movie. And I asked her, I didn't say it's not all right to go out with him. What I said is, do you really believe that he's willing to drive 7 hours round trip just for a dinner with you and maybe a movie, and he's going to turn around and go back home and not lay some kind of a guilt trip on you, not pressure you, not ask if he can stay at your place or those sorts of things? And she said, no, it's pretty obvious now that I know he lives 3.5 hours away that there is an agenda there. I said, okay, then you have made this decision for yourself. You didn't need me for that. But see, this is kind of what made me think about this, because there are a lot of those little tiny things that you don't really think about until you dig a little deeper. I have driven 3 hours just to have dinner with somebody, but it was somebody I knew very well, somebody that I was way willing to, make the effort to go and see because I cared very much for that person. Hell, if you read my book, I once flew almost 8,000 miles just for a single kiss, but that's not what I was hoping for. I did have an agenda, but I knew her for 6 months before that. All right, so just kind of keep that sort of thing in mind. There are definitely people out there with an agenda, and you just have to be inquisitive. You just have to be a little skeptical. Somebody who has had one conversation with you and has never even spoken to you on the phone, you can pretty much bet that he's not going to drive all the way across the state just to have dinner with you. He's hoping for a hell of a lot more, and you just need to be cognizant of that. So let's talk, Red, about what makes somebody a sociopath, a predator, versus just being a jerk. Now, we've talked, a lot of the things that we've mentioned this evening so far could make a person a jerk or a sociopath predator. But let me just throw out some of these characteristics of the sociopath, and you can kind of react to them as you like. One of them is a lack of empathy. a lack of empathy, also a lack of guilt, a lack of remorse. He's never sorry about anything that he's ever done wrong. He's pathological. He's glib. He's manipulative. Remember, like Kaylee was mentioning, that he actually told one woman that Kaylee was at his place to get her to go over there. That's very manipulative. He's very charming at first. He's impulsive. He might be nomadic. He might not even have a regular place to stay or a real home. I mean, a sociopath sometimes has a very disjointed, he's not very well rooted in how he lives. What do you think of those characteristics, Red? I mean, any of those strike a bell with you in terms of a predator?
Those are pretty much the standard pathological, sociological markers we look for when we're looking at someone who is psychotic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and generally, psychos are predators.
Yeah, but someone who is psychotic, just by the very, by the connotation of the word, I mean, it's very apparent. You can look at someone who's psychotic and you can go, boy, that person's really psychotic. But a sociopath is really polished. I mean, they're charming. They're sweet. They are, they are the most wonderful person in the world the first couple of times you meet them, until something goes wrong, until they start manipulating you, or start lying to you, or they start exploiting you, or whatever.
Well, so was Jeffrey Dahmer.
Well, exactly. He was one of the most charming people you could meet, supposedly. I don't know. Believe it or not, I was in an Army unit with Jeffrey Dahmer back in like 1985 or something like that. I can't remember when it was. A long time ago. I mean, believe it or not, he was an Army medic. Kind of scary to think about, isn't it? Anyway, here's some other clues. They seek out vulnerable people, and this is a point that Cheeky just made in the chat room, is they tend to gravitate towards the vulnerable, the very young, the very vulnerable, the very naive, sometimes the very needy. Sometimes it might be somebody in dire financial straits, and they offer a little bit of money, or they offer a little bit of security or a place to stay. These are the people who take in runaways and keep them against their will. Those kind of people. Here's another clue that I think is really, and this is one you probably don't think about very much, but when I tell it to you, and when I say this, you're going to think hard about people you know. These are the people who exhaust and drain you emotionally. Think about that.
Those are my kids.
Okay, so, well, like mother, that apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? So.
Oh, that's so not nice, Daddy. That's really not.
I'm really a nice teddy bear down deep. You know that. So anyway, these people exhaust and drain you emotionally. And I see people in the chat room right now who know exactly what I'm talking about. Here's another one. They attempt to charm the powerful and influential, but they walk all over the little people. Sound like anybody you know?
Mm-hmm.
They're charming at first, but then, whammo, they hit you with...
Oh, you and I have had many a conversation.
Yes. Here's another one. They thrive on your pity and your sympathy. Okay. Here's another one. They can sense weakness in you. Whenever you have that little bit of guilt, that little bit of hesitation, that sympathy, feeling sorry for somebody, that's when they manipulate and exploit you. And here's one that I think will probably ring true with a lot of people when you think about it. They are no give, all take. Take, no giving. These are your sociopath friends. That 1 in 25, and personally I think it's higher than that number. I really do. I don't think it's 4%. It's probably about double that. I'd be willing to bet that it's probably about 1 in 15 is my guess. What do you think?
I think in our lifestyle it's probably higher, just due to the fact that a lot of people will use this as a ploy.
Well, sure. And our lifestyle
Because
lifestyle
how easy it is to just become something different.
Sure. And it attracts those kind of people specifically. I mean, if you are a sociopath, I mean, the BDSM lifestyle is like a candy store for you, because you have all these people who, at least on the surface, like some of the stuff that you're dishing out, until it starts to get really ugly, and then suddenly they don't like it so much. So here are a few other clues. Now, these clues, that what we just talked about, those signs were sociopaths in general in society. But let's talk about some of the clues that you would see in somebody that you would meet in this lifestyle, specifically the BDSM lifestyle, yellow or red flags that tell you that this person might be a predator or might be a sociopath or just might frickin' be dangerous. The first one is what...
Oh, that one, the first one is if you don't play their way, you're wrong.
Well, absolutely. Here's another one, and this is the one Kaylee brought up. There's no respect for limits. In fact, they're proud of the no limits thing, and you have a thing to tell them what you always tell the people who say they don't have limits.
Oh, that came from a very, very good friend of ours.
Mm-hmm.
We had many a discussion at coffee about this. So you don't have any limits, so I can take a sledgehammer to you.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately everybody's shocked look hits their face. Well, no, that's not okay. Well, that's a limit.
Exactly.
So you have a limit. You just don't know what your limit is yet.
Yeah. Didn't you once say, you don't have any limits, so you don't mind if I cut off your thumb, or put a nail?
Yeah. So you don't mind if I step on your balls with my stilettos?
Yeah. And so suddenly they have limits. But these predators, these sociopaths, these dangerous, creepy doms, they don't respect your limits, and in fact, they will ridicule you because you have them. And so that's your first red flag. Here's another one. Punishment is used as an excuse for abuse. Now, there are a lot of people who like punishment in this lifestyle. So what's the difference between what's normal, what's expected in this lifestyle versus abuse? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, if you feel good afterwards, that's probably normal BDSM. If you feel bad afterwards, I'd say that's probably abuse. All right? If fear is being used against you outside of a BDSM scene, if you are being threatened or if you are having fear used as a weapon against you outside of a BDSM scene, then that's abuse. All right? And the bottom line is abuse tears you down. If you're being built up, that's probably a healthy BDSM dynamic. If you're being torn down, that's not healthy. That's probably abuse. So keep those things in mind. Now here's another clue that the person that you are considering may be a sociopath or a predator, and that is anger plays a big part in your dynamic. Anger or hatred of your gender or your age or your body type or whatever. I mean, if anger or rage or hatred come into play at all in your dynamic and you don't feel good about it, guess what? That's a huge red flag. And sometimes
we don't spank out of anger, we spank out of love.
There you go. And, there's nothing, it's one thing to like a little bit of humiliation play. It's another thing to be humiliated 24/7 all the time, to be torn down, to have to deal with somebody's hatred of women or hatred of big people or small people or skinny people or males or females or whatever. If there's hatred or anger involved, let's just call it what it is. It's abuse, okay? Lack of control. If somebody loses control, that person is dangerous. I don't care if that person is a dominant or a submissive or your pet or your mother-in-law. I don't care. If that person has a lack of control, that person is dangerous, period. Take that to the bank. All right? Here's one I want to hear your opinion about, because you and I both know some emotional masochists, Red. So So tell me what you think about emotional abuse being a red flag.
To a degree, I mean, like you said, there are some that do the, you know, humiliation, the degradation, and that's their thing. That's what they need. What happens behind closed doors, you know, we can't really see because who knows? They might be loved and you know, cuddled and all that kind of stuff afterwards. But what we see is, you know, you're worthless, you don't do this right, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's a domestic violence victim. You know, she keeps going back to him because she doesn't know any other way to be. He keeps going back to her because he doesn't know any other way to be.
And there are only so many people you can victimize out there. So I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of convenience as well.
Most of it is careful planning, though, because they want to know they have complete control over someone to the point that they know no matter how detrimental it gets, that person will always be brought back in some form or fashion.
Well, I think that even emotional masochism has its time and place, and that time and place is not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right.
No.
Kind of like flogging. You know, I love flogging, but if I were flogging you, Red, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that would be abuse. Emotional sadism.
It would get old for me, and I'd turn around and look at you and go, "Is that all you got?"
It is.
I mean, if you're doing it for a scene, that's fine, you know, and it serves its purpose. But if you're doing it habitually, daily, you know,
all the time,
all the time, all the way through, then it's going to get real old real quick. And
somebody is treating you like garbage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's abuse, right? No question asked. All right, here's the last one I want to throw out, and we have talked about this a little bit, but I think it deserves being expounded on a little bit more, and that is somebody who tries to isolate you from the community. Now, why does somebody isolate you from the community? I'll tell you why. Because they don't want people who are thinking rationally, people who do have experience and knowledge, exposing him as the predator or the poser that he is. And that's really the only reason. Anyone who tells you that they refuse to let you be a part of the community in any way, shape, or form, or to have friends or talk to other submissives, that person is trying to isolate you for his own purposes, and they're usually not good purposes. So,
isolating from individuals is never a bad thing, especially if you have bad experiences with them or you know them to be detrimental. That is a healthy thing, but for the overall, the entirety of it, that is a serious no-go in my book.
It is. It is a very big red flag. And also the people who say, oh, no, well, I'm not, even the ones who may or may not try to isolate you, the people who self-isolate themselves from the community, that's not necessarily a red flag, but in my book it's a yellow flag. Because if, at the very least, sometimes it means that they have really bad social skills, which kind of takes us back to the sociopath, you know? So, you know, the guy who tells you, or the girl who tells you, oh, well, I don't associate with any of those people in the community because they're all jerks, they're all posers, they're all, you know, idiots or something. Something's really wrong there, because guess what? Not everybody is a jerk or a poser or an idiot. So that's a big red flag, big yellow flag. It's at least a yellow flag for me. It may be a red flag for some people, but do dig a little deeper when you start to see stuff like that. Now, what are some of the questions that you might want to ask somebody that you're just getting to know? And sometimes it doesn't have to be face to face. It can be online. It can be on the telephone, whatever. I'm going to give you one that I just threw out the other day to somebody I care very much about, and I told her to ask her potential friend, why have I not seen you at any of our local events or munches? And I think that's a very good question, because, you know, if the guy will not show his face at any of the events, local events, Sometimes that means he's got something to hide. Sometimes it means he's just a jerk. Or maybe he's already pissed off so many people that he's going to get his ass beat if he does show his face. All right? So I think that's a very good question to ask. Why have I not seen you at any of our local munches? How about asking for references? You ever ask someone for references, Red?
I've asked how long they've been around. I've asked, so who in the community do you know? Who have you played with? Things like that. I don't go and outright ask them for references unless we're going to do some serious playing on some serious impact scenes or stuff like that, because I want to make sure that they're not portraying skills they don't have. Because especially in impact scenes, you can do a hell of a lot of damage real quick. So at that point, I would ask for references. But so I see you've been with so-and-so and so-and-so, what happened with that, if you don't mind me asking? Especially if they're a hopper. The ones that I call hoppers are the ones that have a new dom or new sub every other friggin' day.
Now, Kaylee brings up a pretty interesting question in the chat room. She says, okay, so what if his reason for not going to local munches is that he would be fired from his or her job? That's a pretty credible reason for not being involved locally. However,
But that I have a problem with, because there's so many ways to be involved without, compromising your professional relationships.
Well,
that excuse isn't really that valid.
And plus, these are the same guys who say they'll drive 3 hours to have dinner with you, but they can't drive an hour to attend a function in another city where they won't be recognized. You see what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying. There's so many other ways, because there's so many communities, unless you're in BFE.
And, oh, by the way, if he's that worried about getting fired from his or her job, why is he trolling for submissives on FetLife or in chat rooms and things like that? You see, I mean, there's either he is worried or he isn't worried, but these inconsistencies are what ought to raise a flag. All right, so let's say you have decided that so-and-so is a predator, so-and-so is a sociopath, and you need to steer clear of that person. What else can you do? I mean, we've talked about warning people. I'm going to just throw something out here real quick. You can be sued, or you can be charged with a crime if you try to call somebody a predator. All right, even if it happens to be true, you can still be charged with a crime. You can still be sued, even if it's true. So this idea, Red, where you said, well, I make sure of my facts first, yes, but you're also making yourself very vulnerable. And I think also when you go around labeling people as predators publicly, you run a very big risk of being judge, jury, and executioner when you really don't know all of the facts sometimes. So, I mean, this is a very scary thing for me. And any one of us could be labeled a predator by anybody whose heart was broken or anybody who feels that they've been wronged somehow. And, the word predator carries a hell of a lot of weight out there. The connotations are far more serious than just a guy who has broken somebody's heart. So kind of keep that in mind. You don't want to be charged with cyber stalking or cyber bullying or libel or slander or defamation of character. Watch out for yourself while you're watching out for your friends. Any last words, Red?
Always question everything. Don't ever take anything for face value. I'm sorry, that's a little pessimistic of me, but especially in our world and our lifestyle, you can't take something from someone who has never shown their face, never shown up to anything at face value.
We're all out of time, Red. I want to thank everyone for listening to Domination Submission Radio. This has been Mike Makai and Little Red. Hope you'll tune in next week. Bye-bye.